Welcome back to the channel. Today we're stepping into one of the most iconic stories in American railroad history, the tale of the General and the Great Locomotive Chase. We're starting right here at the Southern Museum in Kennesaw, where the real locomotive is preserved and where the story comes alive through exhibits, artifacts, and the film that retells the daring events of 1862. I've got a collection of clips from inside the museum to walk you through, and then we're taking this adventure beyond the building. After we finish here, we'll drive just up the road to the actual railroad where the chase unfolded. You can still see the old pilings standing in the river, quiet reminders of the day this locomotive thundered through history. So let's begin our journey with the General and follow the story from the museum all the way back to the rails themselves. There's something special about the General that deserves a moment. This locomotive isn't just a display piece. It's the heart of one of the most dramatic railroad stories in American history. During the Civil War, the General was at the center of the Great Locomotive Chase, a daring attempt by Union raiders to steal the engine and disrupt Confederate supply lines. The story was so unbelievable that Hollywood eventually turned it into a movie, helping people visualize the danger, the speed, and the intensity of that day. But here in the museum, you get something the movie can't give you. You're standing in front of the real locomotive. The real wood, the real iron, the real history. The exhibits around it fill in the details, the people involved, the decisions made, and the moments that changed the course of the chase.
There she is, Dad. Wow. Beautiful.
As we walk around the General, you can see right away that this is a classic American 440 steam locomotive, the kind that defined railroading in the mid-1800s. Those four small wheels up front helped guide the engine around curves, and the four big driving wheels behind them delivered the power. This was the standard locomotive of its day, and the General is one of the most famous survivors. Moving along the side, you can see how simple and how brilliant the design really is. Inside the boiler, a firebox burned wood, and later coal, heating water until it turned into high-pressure steam. That steam was sent down into the two cylinders mounted right here on the frame. As the steam pushed the pistons back and forth, those pistons turned the big driving wheels through the system of rods and levers you're seeing now. No electronics, no diesel engine, no generators, just fire, water, pressure, and motion. And yet with that simple system, locomotives like this pulled entire trains across states and through some of the most challenging moments in our history. As we come around toward the cab, imagine the heat that would have poured out of the firebox, the constant shaking of the frame, and the teamwork it took to run a locomotive like this. The engineer watching the track ahead, the fireman feeding the flames, both of them trusting this machine with their lives. And when you stand here in the museum, looking at the real wood, the real iron, the real craftsmanship, it's easy to picture this engine thundering down the rails during the Great Locomotive Chase, the very story that made the General famous enough to become a movie. This locomotive isn't just a display. It's a survivor, a witness to history. And today, we get to walk right beside it. As we come around this side of the General, we'll finish walking down along the frame and the tender so you can see the rest of the details that made this locomotive such a powerhouse in its day. Every bolt, every rod, every board of this engine has a story to tell, and standing this close really helps you appreciate the craftsmanship that kept it running through some of the most intense moments of the Civil War. Once we wrap up this walk around, we're going to take you out of the museum and onto the real landscape where the Great Locomotive Chase actually happened. We'll drive north along the old route, following the same direction the General once thundered. And when we get to the river, you'll see the old pilings still standing, the last physical reminders of the railroad line that carried this engine through history. So let's finish up on this side, take one more look at this incredible machine, and then head out to the rails where the story truly unfolded. Now we've made it to Ackworth, our first stop along the chase route. We're just doing a very quick look around here so you can see what the station area looks like today. The modern railroad still runs right through town, following the same northbound path the General once took during the Great Locomotive Chase. This is where our journey really starts to connect the museum story with the real landscape. From here, we'll keep heading north, following the line mile by mile as we trace the route of the chase.
That's the actual railroad that the chase took place.
From Ackworth, we're continuing our drive north, following the same railroad line the general raced along during the Great Locomotive Chase. The modern tracks still run right beside us, tracing the path of that incredible story mile after mile. We're heading toward the Etowah River now, where we'll make our next stop. This is one of the most meaningful places along the route, because the old pilings from the original railroad bridge are still standing in the water. They're some of the last physical reminders of the line that carried the general through this part of Georgia. So stay with me as we follow the rails toward the river. When we cross the river, you'll be able to see those pilings for yourself, silent witnesses to the chase that made this locomotive famous. We've just crossed the Etowah River, and now we're getting ready to drive down to the other side so we can ride along the riverbank and get a closer look. From down below, you'll be able to see the old pilings much better, the ones that once held up the original railroad bridge during the Great Locomotive Chase. It's incredible to think that the general raced across this very spot in 1862, and these pilings are still standing here more than a century and a half later. They're some of the last physical traces of the original line, and seeing them up close really connects the museum story to the real landscape where everything happened. So we'll make our way down the road here and follow along the river for a better view. Our next stop is Cartersville, and here we're going to take a moment to show you the train station. It's a quick stop, but an important one, because Cartersville played a major role during the Civil War, especially in the story of the Great Locomotive Chase. Back in the 1860s, Cartersville was one of the busiest points on the Western and Atlantic Railroad. This line was the main supply route for the Confederacy, connecting Atlanta to Chattanooga. Every day, trains carrying troops, weapons, food, and military supplies passed right through this town. That made Cartersville a strategic location, and a place where any disruption could have serious consequences. During the Great Locomotive Chase, this was one of the towns where the Confederates were desperately trying to figure out what was happening. When the raiders came through with the general, they passed right along this stretch of track, trying to stay ahead before anyone could stop them. Cartersville was also where southbound trains were moving on the line, which forced the raiders to slow down and weave through traffic, something that ultimately worked against them. The station you see today isn't the original wartime structure, but it stands on the same historic line, in the same town that witnessed the confusion, the urgency, and the rising alarm as word of the stolen locomotive spread. Modern trains still roll through here, following the same path that made this railroad famous. So we've taken a brief look around the station, and now we'll show you a map where the train stopped 20 minutes for breakfast. Raiders seized the locomotive general and 3 boxcars. Fuller, Murphy, and Kane, the engineer, pursued on foot. We won't be driving any farther north than Cartersville today, but I want to show you how the rest of the Great Locomotive Chase played out. If you look at the map here, you can see the route continuing north through towns like Kingston, Adairsville, and Calhoun, all places where the raiders were trying desperately to stay ahead while the Confederates closed in behind them. The chase finally came to an end at Ringgold, right up near the Tennessee border. By the time the general reached that point, the raiders had run out of fuel, water, and steam pressure. The locomotive simply couldn't go any farther. With the Confederates only seconds behind them, the raiders abandoned the engine and scattered into the woods. Most of them were captured shortly afterward, and several were later recognized for their bravery, becoming some of the very first recipients of the Medal of Honor. So even though we're stopping our drive here in Cartersville today, the story continues all the way up this line to Ringgold, where the final chapter of the chase was written. It's an incredible route, and seeing it laid out on the map really helps you understand just how far this locomotive traveled during one of the most dramatic pursuits in American railroad history. Before we end today's journey, I wanted to bring you back for one more walk around the General. After seeing the museum, the stations, the river, and the route of the chase, standing beside this locomotive again feels different. You understand the story a little deeper now, the danger, the determination, and the history that unfolded along these rails. As we circle around it one last time, take in the craftsmanship, the strength, and the endurance of this engine. It survived war, time, and change. It was built for work, but it became part of a story far bigger than anyone could have imagined. And moments like this remind me of something important. God often takes ordinary things and ordinary people and uses them in extraordinary ways. Just like this locomotive, we may not always see the full picture of the journey we're on. But he does. He knows the purpose, the path, and the impact our lives can have, even when we're just doing the everyday work set in front of us. So as we wrap up here beside the General, I hope this story encourages you, in the same way that it does for me. History isn't just about the past. It's a reminder of how God weaves meaning, purpose, and resilience into every chapter. Thank you for coming along on this journey today. Stay safe, stay grateful, and may God bless you as you travel the rails of your own story.